This is Paw Print, an animal rescue community, episode 147. I'm Nancy Ree.
And I'm Harold Ree.
Today's guest is Craig Grossi, author of Craig and Fred.
Top reaches down and grabs Fred like a jug of milk and lifts him into the bag, and we stuff him in the bag and zip it closed. And, you know, Fred went on a helicopter ride before he ever went on a car ride. That's just such a big moment in my life, and obviously Fred's life too.
We are very excited to have Craig Grossi on the show today. He's a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, and his book, Craig and Fred, is in many ways a memoir of Craig's life before his service, during his time with the United States Marine Corps, and of course afterwards. But the heart of this story is a dog named Fred, whom he meets in the Helmand province of Afghanistan. Craig and Fred launches on Tuesday, October 31st. You can find it in hardcover, audiobook read by Craig himself, and they even have a young reader's version. If you want to learn more about Craig Grossi and Fred the dog, go to their website, fredtheafghan.com, or go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/147.
I joined in 2003. It was when I went to boot camp. I ended up in the military police, which in the corrections department, which wasn't really the duty that I had envisioned for myself. I ended up serving in jails, kind of all over the place, and working with inmates a lot. And that I knew after my first 4 years that I loved being a Marine, but that corrections and military police in general just wasn't really for me. And so it was really frustrating time for me, because when I joined, I thought, like, you know, I felt really at home, and I loved the culture within the Marine Corps, and how, you know, if you work hard, you get recognized, and you get the things, you know, the duties that you want and stuff like that. But it wasn't really working out for me that way. And so I ended up getting out of the military in 2007 after my first 4 years of active duty, and moving home, and just kind of had like a 9-month period where I was like living back at home with my dad, kind of floating around, not really excited about my 4 years in the Marines, because most of my friends that I went through boot camp with and stuff were in Iraq and Afghanistan, and like doing the things that I had envisioned for myself, and I had kind of come up short in my mind, and so after about 9 months of waiting tables and just working any job I could find, I decided to go back in, but to really stick to my vision of just some, like, I didn't know what it was, but I wanted something hard. I wanted something that was going to really challenge me, and I wanted to be a part of a group of Marines that were better than me, and that would, you know, hold me to a really high standard. And I, in a crazy roundabout way, ended up finding the intelligence community within the Marine Corps, and it challenged me. The training challenged me in ways that I never could have imagined, and not just physically, but mentally. Like the tests that we took and the academic environment that was created was super stressful, and it was all for a purpose. And then when I graduated, not long after, we started training to go to Afghanistan, and then I really saw things lining up. You know, the guys I was going to Afghanistan with were awesome. We were all really close. And then once I got into Afghanistan, there was I went, the way I was deployed was general support. So I was just kind of sent into Camp Leatherneck in Helmand province, and I wasn't assigned to one unit, and I was kind of supposed to be able to float around and support different units for their intelligence collection. I ended up getting assigned to Recon, which is the most elite guys we have in terms of infantry forces, and they're tough guys to kind of make buddies with sometimes, because they really are, you know, they have a very high standard when it comes to their operations and the people that they let come with them. But I was lucky enough to make some friends and kind of prove myself to them, and so I ended up spending my whole deployment running around with those guys. And if I hadn't made that good impression, if I hadn't been in that, found that intelligence field at all, I wouldn't have made it to Fred, and we wouldn't have come together. And it's just like, going back that far, you can see, you know, through my frustration in my first 4 years, and with not deploying and with not really having a job, it was all for a purpose. And then then getting back in and finding intel and finding recon and going to, and it's all lined me, and it's all led me to Fred. And that still astonishes me to this day, just the way life works. And I think lots of people can relate to that.
So you did the military police for 4 years. As you describe in the book, you were, kind of frustrated, right? It wasn't the challenge you were hoping for. And then essentially you did something that I think most folks would think would be a little bit crazy, which is you re-enlisted.
Yeah, at the time, they were doing a lot of, so this was in, when I re-enlisted, it was in late 2008, I think. And they were doing a lot of recalls. And so, and the thing about, because the way my contract worked was I had 4 years of active service and then 4 years on the inactive reserve, which meant they could call me back at any time. And so if they called you back, if they recalled you within that 4 year period, you were kind of they could do whatever they wanted with you.
Well, you'd probably just go back to military police, right?
Yeah, exactly, which I didn't want to do. To me, it was like, well, if I re-enlist, I'll be able to do something I want. And that was all I wanted, was to find a field that I wanted to do. Which anybody that's been in the military knows that's a tricky thing. I mean, it doesn't really work out that way most of the time. It's once you sign that line, and then you're theirs, and they need you to peel potatoes, and that's what you're going to do. Once I found intel, there was such a high demand that just to meet the qualifications to go to training, a lot of people couldn't make the cut. So once I had made it through the first round of interviews and stuff like that, I was a relatively high value enlistee, and I was going to stay on that path because they needed Marines for that job, for that field.
Well, so now skipping to your situation in Afghanistan, I mean, of course, you're like fighting a war and you're finding a dog. Could you maybe describe to people how you were able to balance those two pieces? Surprisingly
natural, because everybody knows like what a dog does for you, and back home in the States, like you come home from work and your dog is there, and you go outside, you go for a walk, and you sit down and just unwind with your dog, and like the day just kind of melts away, and apply that to any environment, even if it is a war zone. For those like in between fire, defending ourselves from the Taliban onslaught that we were surviving in, we would go over to Fred and we would give him a piece of beef jerky or to find a piece of rope and play tug of war. And it might have been for 20 minutes, it might have been for 20 seconds, but in that amount of time, all of us were just with a dog. We weren't in Afghanistan. We weren't, fighting for our lives. We were hanging out with Fred, and that was, that's a really powerful thing. And that's the more time we spent with him, the more we realized how special he was. And the more, to me, I felt, just really responsible for him, and because he liked me best and was sleeping in my sleeping bag and following me around the most. And, he felt like my dog from day one. But it was all of us. It was all the guys I was with that really were just in love with him.
You had this relationship with Fred. You were building it up. But there were some terrible risks that you guys were taking. Can you maybe describe to folks why fighting in a war and trying to take care of a dog, why that can actually become a pretty dangerous situation?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a rule. It's a standing order for all U.S. persons, in Afghanistan, and I'm pretty sure still abroad in terms of the different combat environments we're in now. You just don't approach and don't befriend stray animals, and it's not a bad rule. It really isn't. It was just a little inconvenient for Fred, but up until we came across Fred, we didn't have a problem following that rule. The dogs, unfortunately, that we saw in Helmand Province specifically, in Sangin District, were just unapproachable. And they're a lot of them were beautiful, but they were vicious, and unfortunately were products of their environment. And they roamed around in packs and just, were just kind of very predatory and unapproachable. And so with regard to that, I mean, that's why that rule is there, and even if you do, find a friendly dog, that they want to discourage interaction, because the dog might, develop a disease and then bite you, and then now you're infected, and you have to get taken out of the field, and that's one body that's off the line. That's one body that's not doing their job, and then it just throws the whole system out of whack. So, that was a big concern, and it was also, a risk for Fred, and I didn't want to feel like I was endangering him any more than he already was, by befriending him, and because if I had been caught with him, he would have been euthanized, and I could have gotten in a lot of trouble as well. But more specifically, I would have felt like really selfish that I had risked this dog's life, and when he was, that was all he ever knew was the life he was leading. So yeah, I mean, it was on top of managing operations and patrolling and just staving off Taliban assaults. Yeah, the idea of being buddies with Fred was just kind of added to the stress, but it was worth it.
I mean, it was pretty amazing that, there were so many ways that, as you said, I mean, euthanasia is sort of the policy. You had some friends on your side. I think one gentleman whom you call Top, he was, I mean, he's one of those guys who he could have put the order in to euthanize Fred, but instead even though he was a very tough guy, as you describe him, he kind of had a slight soft spot.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And he could have put that order in, or he could have just told us, leave him alone, I don't want to see any of you, like cuddling up to dogs. And, but yeah, he's an amazing guy for a lot of reasons. And one of them, is just the fact that he was able to kind of see the value of Fred. And I mean, he's a dog guy himself. So I don't think I think we all, like, especially me, because I hadn't known him that long. I was just thinking, like, he's in leadership. Like, if anybody's gonna, kind of turn on Fred, it would be him. And I was kind of looking to him for the example of like what kind of support we were gonna have, and that's a really great moment in the book when Fred kind of goes over to him and they have their little moment together. That I love that part.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just so many different people played. I mean, it's tough in a 30-minute interview. We cannot cover all the different. I mean, it's literally just like so many amazing episodes of. I'm thinking of the DHL shipping facility of all things. Who'd have thought DHL would have played a part? But I mean, but there's so many different pieces. I mean, I guess what really stands out to you as one of the seminal moments of how you were able to get Fred from Afghanistan to the United States?
It's hard to pick one, but I think that the most dramatic and the one that still gives me the sweats to this day is the fact that he followed me to the helicopter, and that's a really powerful scene in the book that I hope I've done justice. But so ultimately, what I'm saying is that it was Fred. It was his move and his decision to follow us to this noisy, dusty, flying machine that came out of the sky, and running on the back of a helicopter is something that they have to train military working dogs to do. I mean, it's not a common thing that a dog would just do. And Fred is just this little pup off the street, and it didn't matter if we were running into a volcano, he was following us. and he was following me. And so that, to me, that's the moment where everything else fell into place. Like the fact that he did that, like to me, after that, that bravery that he showed and that loyalty that he showed to follow me to the helicopter, there was nothing I wasn't going to do to get him home.
Yeah. Can you maybe go in a little bit more detail when you mean follow you to the helicopter? I mean, you were walking how many miles and at what time of the day were you walking? I mean, this was not a usual journey you were taking.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we walked, so the compound that we were inhabiting was right on the border of the Green Zone, which is where the Taliban was really holding a lot of ground. And so when it came time, after about a month and a half, when it came time for us to leave and go back to base for a break, we weren't going to get picked up right there because the Taliban, would hear the helicopters and they would have a good opportunity to maybe take one out. So in the middle of the night, we just broke down our base, and it's just sand. All we did was put sandbags on the walls, and so we could just cut up the sandbags and packed up our stuff and just started marching into the desert, which was the opposite direction of the Green Zone. And we just marched out in just a long line as far as we could go, putting as much distance between the Taliban and us as we could. And because out in the desert, it would be a lot harder for them to sneak up on us. We'd be able to see them in terms of maybe getting a shot at our helicopter. And so yeah, I mean, I wasn't, I in that moment, I was really just kind of hoping that Fred would follow us. And actually he didn't follow us that night. I think he was a little too tempted by all the food and stuff we had thrown into the trash pile. And I think he was a little distracted by that. So I think he stayed and was maybe just having himself a little feast while we marched out into the desert. And my heart really sank, in that moment. And then the next morning when the sun came up, one of the guys we had a little rooftop position that we made into in the compound we took in the desert. And one of the guys started calling to me and he's like, get up here. And we looked through some binoculars and there's just this little cloud of dust off in the distance. And it was a real like homeward bound moment where Fred's just kind of trotting through the desert, like with this big, grin on his face and just this very confident little trot. And he comes right into our compound like he owns it, and it's just like kind of wooing and like barking at everyone and just very excited. And so that was one thing, the fact that he found us after we probably marched about, 5-6 miles out into the desert. And then that was great. And then, so, what I said to him after that was, okay, like, I'm glad you're here, but like, I still need to see one more sign because in this moment, all the other Marines are now telling, like really feeding into my anxiety, like Grossi, like you got to get him out of here. Like he's so cool, and like, we'll help, we'll do this, we'll do that. But like, ultimately the decision was, and the risk was mine. And I was really feeling the two voices, like why would you remove him from his natural environment? Like it's too much of a risk. If you get caught, like you would have essentially just killed him. And like, there's lots of dogs back home that need rescuing. Like what, why would you do this? And then the other side, it's like, think about how awesome this dog is. Think about how unlikely, it was that he followed you and just how different he is than all the other dogs you saw and how special he is and how awesome it would be to have him back home and show him your country and really build a life with him. And so it was going back and forth to the point where like, I told all the guys to leave me alone, just get off my back. Like I'll figure it out. And I pulled Fred aside and was like, hey man, like if you want, I still talk to him like a person. I don't know I think lots of other dog owners do this too, but I was like, if you want to get out of here, if you want this, if you want to take this risk, then I need you to follow me to the helicopter. And if you follow me, if you ignore all the noise and all of the reasons to run away from something like that, then I'm in. I'm in like, all the way. And I was honestly, I thought like 50-50 shot that he would. Our extract ended up getting rolled by a couple of hours. So instead of getting picked up at night, we got picked up in the morning, and which is a lot more dangerous because then you have just the Taliban has a lot more of an idea of where we are and where the helicopters are going. And so it was all the more just kind of stressful. And we were lining up, waiting for the helicopters to come in, and the helicopter comes over top of us, and it ends up kind of being what's called a brownout, where it just creates a really serious dust storm, and that instead of just kind of passing over you, it kind of lingers. And so it just makes you really need to focus on the person in front of you, so you don't end up, getting lost on your way to the helicopter and kind of leading everybody behind you in a different direction, in the wrong direction. And it's pretty dangerous because sometimes you can run. There's just stories about guys running into the tail rotor of a helicopter and being killed, and it's really scary. And so all of this is kind of, on our minds, and again, it's like, yeah, it's this environment that's very stressful. And on top of that, I'm concerned about Fred, but I was sticking good to my word. I had a duffel bag in my pocket. And it's just these little collapsible duffel bags that we carry. And I stuffed it in my cargo pocket. And if he came, that was my plan. I was just going to grab him and stuff him in it. And there was it wasn't going to be sexy. It wasn't going to be, anything, super elaborate. It was just, I'm going to put him in a bag and make him look like gear, and we'll go from there. And so we're running on, and I'm just trying to keep my eye on Dave, the guy in front of me. And I feel a little poke at my heel, and I look down, and Fred is there, and he's terrified, but he's there. And I was like, okay, let's go. And I grabbed the duffel bag, and the wind is kind of blowing it. I'm trying to get it open, and from behind me comes Top, and Top reaches down and grabs Fred like a jug of milk by the back of the neck, and lifts him into the bag, and we stuff him in the bag and zip it closed. And we ran on the helicopter, and everybody, all the guys, I'll never forget just walking on the back of that helicopter, and all the recon guys. And we were pretty dirty at this point. We'd been in the field for over a month and a half with no shower, no running water. And our beards were coming in, but everybody's teeth were showing because everybody was smiling. It's all these rough looking guys, with these big smiles on their face because they know that I've got a dog in a bag. And, Fred went on a helicopter ride before he ever went on a car ride. And that was just, that's just such a big moment in my life, and obviously Fred's life too. But I always think about that, and just if he hadn't trusted me, and if he hadn't been so loyal to me in that moment, everything would have been so different.
We're talking to author Craig Grossi with the book Craig and Fred, launched on Tuesday, October 31st, also known as Halloween here in the United States. Craig, thanks for sharing that story. What do you hope folks get out of reading your book?
What excites me the most about that question is about what, thinking about what people will get is it's always different. And I'm looking forward to talking to people and meeting people after they've read the book, and hearing what they get, and hearing what the story means to them. Because that's something that I saw early on, when I was just kind of telling it, verbally in dog parks and restaurants and bars and anywhere that people would listen. People would tell me, different things that they loved about it, and different things that they saw within it. And so with the book, that's really what I hope, that everybody will kind of draw their own important messages and favorite, kind of relatable stories from it. But if there's one phrase, or if there's one kind of, message within the book, it's just what's possible in our lives when we're stubbornly positive. And that's kind of like a fun phrase that I've developed just in terms of like capturing Fred's message, and just, it's one of stubborn positivity, and like what it is to be that way, and to find find reasons to be positive and to be grateful, and what the power of that. And Fred is a great example of that.
How do folks find you? Whether it's a website or your Facebook page?
Yeah, so if you everything social media wise and our website wise is Fred the Afghan. So if you just go to fredtheafghan.com, you can find links to our events, the book, where you can order the book or buy the book, and all of our social media is Fred the Afghan. So Instagram, Fred the Afghan, Facebook, Twitter. It's all Fred the Afghan, and we just got a new logo made that looks I think it looks really cool. So it's kind of Fred standing on a badge, and it's blue and got Fred standing on top of it. So if you see that, you're in the right place.
Cool. And I believe you're doing a little bit of a book tour. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. We're going to be starting up here in Maine, and we're going to head all the way down to DC, stopping in Connecticut and Rhode Island and Delaware, and Baltimore, and all those events are on our website. If you go to fredtheafghan.com, you'll be able to see just the events tab, and they're all listed there. And that's the first, pretty much the first two and a half weeks of November will be just kind of up and down the East Coast. So a lot of them are going to be at libraries and like local bookstores and places like that. So we're looking forward to meeting people, and we got a lot of books to sign, and we're really, really excited about that. And Fred will be with us, and so people can get a look at him, and we're really excited about it. And we love to travel. So if we don't come to your town, this time around, we're already planning our summer travel, plans. And so, yeah, hopefully we'll get to see everyone.
I go to a lot of events where there are veterans, and we often say, just out of habit, thank you for your service. But when you hear that, I'm just wondering, just asking you directly, when people thank you or they recognize you for being a veteran, what really goes through your mind when you hear those words?
It's great. It's always nice, and it's if it's someone in the grocery store or someone just kind of in passing, like it's always, you can never go wrong with that. But I think if people really want to know more about what's going on with veterans and what's going on, just in the lives of someone that's separated from the service, then you could just kind of very simply and casually follow up your thank you for your service with, like, what are you up to now? Because a lot of vets are still, the transition is kind of always an ongoing thing. At least it has been for me. And it goes from, school to job hunting. And so it's, you'll find just some more details there. If you ask, just a little follow-up question, like what are you up to now that you're out of the Air Force or the Army or whatever branch they were in, what's going on now? And you never know, you might be able to help. You might be able to offer them a job lead or or suggest a program that they could enroll in at school or something like that. So it just kind of opens up more of a dialogue versus just kind of a one-way thank you. So if that's something that people are interested in, I would encourage them to just kind of ask something like that.
Amazing advice, and thanks for that feedback. With that said, other than being a rock star author, what are you up to?
That's a great question, and I have so many plans and just kind of like, I'm just brimming with ambition in terms of this awesome platform now that we have in terms of the book. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I want people to read this book, and I want it to be successful. And I'm really just proud of all the people in it, and I'm proud that I get to share the memory of the guys that we lost over there. And I really want to spend the next, year really just like putting all of my energy behind this book and this story. But that being said, I'm committed to sharing our story just as much as I am committed to sharing other people's. And I really love the idea of just finding a platform, maybe kind of like yours, where, just uplifting rescue stories, or uplifting just people who embody, kind of the message that Fred has, the message of stubborn positivity. And so I'm looking forward to really materializing a lot of this ambition that I have. But ultimately, the book is really my focus for right now, and I have to kind of keep reminding myself that. But yeah, I mean, we're looking forward to just opening more doors for ourselves.
Okay. If there was something you would do, or if there was something you could propose to help veterans connect more with the dogs or even other animals whom they've met on their own journeys, what would you do? What would you propose?
In terms of like rescuing their own dog, or just engaging with more.
The question I'm asking, I guess, is your journey was so hard. It was like so. I mean, it could have gone a totally different way, right? At about maybe 100 or maybe 1,000 different points.
Yeah, totally.
Is there anything, I don't know, everything from military policy to resources that civilians can offer? I mean, what would you propose that might help a veteran who just like you befriends an animal and really feels super passionate about bringing him or her home?
Yeah, I mean, there's a nonprofit called Puppy Rescue Mission, and they do most of their work in Afghanistan, I think. But it seems like I follow them on Instagram, and I've spoken with them a little bit, but they weren't around when I found Fred. But that's a great place to start, and even if you're in Europe, and you're deployed over there, or you're living over there, and you meet a dog and you want to formally adopt them, and they're a great resource to just kind of tap. And so yeah, it's Puppy Rescue Mission, and I think there was one called Baghdad Pups, but I'm not sure if they're still around. But I guess in general, the advice I would give is just kind of do your research, and even if you could do so before you deploy, or before you go somewhere. That way, if you do come across a Fred, or you do come across a little soul that you want to send home, and that you can't live without, you'll know, at least kind of have a shell of a plan, and you won't have to be as hasty as I was, because there are people that are out there to help, and if you can kind of just align yourself with them beforehand, then that can make your life a little easier.
Okay. Well, really, I guess just last piece is, I mean, floor is yours. Anything else that you want to share that we haven't covered?
Yeah, no, I mean, I want everyone to know that I'm very humbled already just by the outpouring of support and positive words that people have been messaging us on social media and on our website, and it just I don't take any of it lightly. And it just kind of emboldens me more to continue to write and continue to share our story. And I'm looking forward to meeting everyone and hearing from people more, and hoping to do speaking engagements kind of all over the country soon, and just getting out there and sharing more. And so I guess just thank you to everyone for their support. It means more than I could ever articulate.
Awesome. Well, once again, we're speaking to Craig Grossi, author of Craig and Fred, a Marine, a Stray Dog, and How They Rescued Each Other. Craig, we also asked if you could potentially bless us with a little book reading.
Yeah, I love that. I think I'll do the most common kind of, question that I've gotten over the years is just, how did you meet Fred? And so I think I'll read the section that talks about just our first interaction. It really is the kind of genesis of Fred's message to me and now to everyone. Just to set the scene, we're in, it's probably about day 6 or day 7 in Sangin, and we have been just continuously bombarded by Taliban attacks, everything from artillery to rocket-propelled grenades to machine gun fire, and just really relentless attacks from the green zone. And in between, in the middle of all of this, I had spotted Fred, kind of poking around, and thought he was a really goofy looking little dog, and I was really intrigued by him, but obviously was a little busy, too busy to go over and say hi to him. So in this moment in the book, it's in I think it's chapter 2. Yeah, chapter 2 that we first make contact with Fred. So it was between Taliban attacks that I spotted him. I was hot and exhausted, trying to stay cool in sandals and the thin green running shorts we called silkies. I stood refilling my water bottle and heating some water for Ali, who, despite the heat, insisted on a cup of tea with his lunch. As I put the cap on my water bottle, I watched a goofy-looking dog trot across the compound. With his short legs and puppy-like pep, he looked nothing like other strays I'd seen in Afghanistan. Most were tall and bulky, and they moved around in packs, aggressive over territory and scavenged food. I could tell this dog was different. He didn't have a pack. He was alone. He pranced nonchalantly in the dust, tail bobbing and snout held high, as if he was particularly proud of the morsel of food he was carrying. There was something innocent about him. He seemed unaffected by life in a combat zone. I'd noticed his routine before in the day or so since we'd been in the compound. The dog would go over to the burn pit to rummage for something to eat, then carry little scraps back to his makeshift den, which was a shady spot under a few bushes. Funny little hoarder, I thought. When we first arrived at the compound, I asked the old man about a couple of dogs that were hanging around. "Are they yours?" I asked. If so, we'd helped transport them to the family's new compound along with the livestock. No, he told us. It would have been unusual for a farmer in Sangin to have a pet dog. The villagers loved animals and took great care of their livestock, but they were focused on surviving and on feeding their families. They couldn't afford to feed and care for a pet. Occasionally, when we did come across pet dogs, they were actually used for fighting. After the family left and we moved in, the little dog stayed. It was almost as if this were his compound. I stood and watched him flop down in his spot under the bushes. Beside him, I could see other food scraps he'd accumulated, little MRE wrappers, sticks, and bones. I put down my water bottle, picked up a piece of beef jerky, and started walking over to him, my sandaled feet kicking up dust. When the dog realized I was coming his way, he stopped eating and looked at me. He watched as I approached, squinting to shield his eyes from the sun and dust. A few steps away from him, I paused. "Hey, buddy," I said, "how's it going?" He seemed to be studying me. There was something expressive about his big, light brown eyes, almost human-like. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then I heard a quiet thwap, thwap, thwap. A little cloud of dust kicked up into the air behind him. I couldn't believe it. He was wagging his tail. I took it as an invitation to move closer and crouched down to get a better look at him. The dog's fur was mostly white, with large spots of light orange-brown. He had a long snout with a big black nose and floppy ears. As he looked at me, his eyebrows twitched from side to side, curious. He continued to wag his tail, and his expression was soft and easy, as if he was smiling. The dog seemed happy as a clam, but I could see he was covered in black bugs the size of dimes. They were buzzing around him, then burrowing into the fur on his face and neck. I extended my arm, holding out the piece of beef jerky. "Here you go, buddy," I said. The dog stood up and shook, as if to rid himself of as many bugs as possible before getting near me. He took a few steps forward, his nose leading the way, and inspecting my offering before carefully pulling it from my hand with his front teeth. I laughed, watching him chew the jerky. Most dogs I knew didn't bother chewing treats before sending them down the hatch. "Well, you've got better manners than most, don't you?" I said, and extended my other hand so he could give it a few sniffs. With his permission, I massaged my fingers into the fur around his neck and under his ears. It was coarse and matted. It felt unnaturally stiff, almost like a dirty pair of jeans. But the dog happily leaned into me, pleased with the neck rub. I wondered if it was the first time he'd ever been petted.
We just want to say thank you to Craig Grossi for sharing his story. We also want to say thanks to Eliza Rosenberry with Craig's publisher, William Morrow. Remember that Craig and Fred goes on sale Tuesday, October 31st. If you'd like to learn more about today's guest, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/147. If you'd like to listen to more episodes of Paw Print, you can find us on your favorite podcast app. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Find us at This Is Paw Print. All the music you hear on Paw Print is produced, composed, and performed by the amazing Luke Gardner-Brereton. Find him at info.vanillagroovemedia.com. We just want to say thank you to all the veterans out there who sacrifice an awful lot to protect the freedoms of the countries they serve. And we hope that Craig's book helps spread a message not only of animal rescue, but highlights the stories of some true heroes. And finally, you spread a positive message of love and peace by saving an animal. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next time on Paw Print.
Is a production of EVER Education.
You can't handle the truth.